Welcome to Aidan, Making Businesses Smarter. I'm Matt Slarchik alongside the founder of Aidan, Quentin Fisher. On today's episode, we're kicking off our series with an essential topic, the power of AI and identifying high impact use cases. In today's rapidly evolving technological landscape, organizations across industries are asking the same question. How can we harness AI to create real value? While the potential of AI is immense, success lies not in the technology itself, but in identifying the right problem to solve. So, if you're wondering how AI can drive real results for your business, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Hi, Quentin. So, the first question is why do you believe that it's so important for businesses to focus on AI use cases before jumping into the implementation process right away?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot you can do with AI, but it's important with anything to kind of start with you know solutions or opportunities that have I like to say have some juice for the squeeze, right? So it all takes effort, right? You have to squeeze, the lemon, the orange, whatever, but there needs to be enough kind of output to get that. There's going to be and that's going to change over time as the technology moves, right? You have to squeeze less and less harder, right? As the technology gets better. But right now, you still got to, put some effort to it. So you want to target some use cases that get some real value, right? And there is a lot of value out there, and so just kind of focusing on that, I think of it as almost like a 2 by 2 matrix, right? What's the business value maybe on the y-axis, and then the ease of implementation on the x, right? So you want to be in the upper right? Easy to do, high value, and that's where you want to start, your journey and target those.
Yeah. And that seems so. What seems like the biggest misconception when you're talking to business leaders and they're starting to implement AI? And how do you think this affects their ability to use these valuable use cases? And you kind of mentioned that XY axis. So when you
hmm
talk with your years of experience, where do you see the biggest misconceptions when it comes to AI?
Well, I think there's just first needs to be um, an awareness, right, of the technology a bit. And just, we're not talking they need to develop on their own, but they just need to understand the basics of the stack and what's capable. Because AI has been around a long time, right? That's what expert systems used to be, and then it got into machine learning when all the rules got too complex and too heavy. Then they built machine learning so that it would be the rules would be driven by the data, and then they built into neural nets, and now they have these new generative models. So it's kind of moving along the way, and there's different scenarios and use cases. I kind of like to think of it as there's two main ones right now. One, the classic machine learning, which is the numbers, right? And then the other one is all of the large language models, and that's excluding all the video and all that other stuff. But those are the two main ones: the numbers and the words, right? And right now, it seems as though there's a lot of opportunity on the words side because it's new, and for the first time, we can take a lot of this unstructured text that humans had to read. Right now, what can happen is these machines can read it and summarize it and do all that stuff, and that's novel, right? That's new. So that is typically where there is a ton of opportunity because it's such a new capability that has just opened up a huge amount of possibility, right? So I think that's a kind of the a good place to start where things are kind of text rich and time consuming. That seems to be a big opportunity area. So I'm not sure that's a misconception. It's just more some just understanding maybe where the hits are and where they're not. I think the other thing is it's really about the data, right? They talk about the data is the fuel for this rocket ship kind of thing, right? And the beauty of AI is that it can look at all of your data, right? And right now, there's a lot of systems that all include AI, but they may not have your data, like ChatGPT, amazing system. doesn't have your data except what you put in a prompt, or maybe load up one off, right? There could be a lot of kind of enterprise systems that have AI, but they have AI on the data that's in that system, right? And I think the real power of AI is to look across your kind of corpus of data, your universe of data, and really understand that. I think that's why we advocate that you really need to be thinking about uh, putting your AI on top of something called a data lake, right? And a data lake, sucks in all your data, and then you kind of use that, and you can have multiple sources, and that's very powerful because now you can have this AI system looking at your entire data set and assessing and analyzing and helping you make connections that and insights that maybe a single system couldn't, right? So I think that's another kind of key thing people forget sometimes, that this thing is really powered on data, and it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So that's I think a big kind of key part of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like in these past years, the way technology is moving, we're moving from a space of just zeros and ones, like you said, machine learning to be able to
Mm-hmm.
predict and forecast. And now we're entering this era where these computers are able to scan documents, look at text. Like you used an example of ChatGPT, and it's able to have a lot more power, able to create a lot more technology. So,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the day, all you said, it has to be powered into this data lake. If we don't have a one single source of data, we're not able to do anything with AI. And I think there's a misconception there is, if you already have a bad foundation, just like a home, how can you build a beautiful home if your foundation is on sand? It's just going to be like quicksand and just fail.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but just to talk a bit about it. So there's a lot of lessons we learned on the data side, on the numbers, right? The quantitative stuff, and in building a data lake. And there's a whole pattern in building data lakes. They call it a medallion architecture. So it's like to store stuff in a data lake is super cheap. But what's expensive is processing and cleaning it and all that stuff, right? So what they do there is they they have a medallion architecture: bronze, silver, gold, just like the Olympics. Bronze, that's where you land it. Silver, that's where you clean it. Gold, that's where you kind of do some joins and maybe some aggregations or counts. That's what you kind of report off of and use. So we've kind of learned that in order to kind of get really good quality numbers, whether it's for machine learning or whatever, we have to follow this pattern. And it's interesting, like with the unstructured text, the documents, like that stuff is not managed at all, right? It's just in a SharePoint folder or something. It's
yeah.
just a mess, right? So you can't use that. And when does it when is it stale? When is it detrimental? When do you need to pull it out? Right? Like all these kind of things, right? That you need to think about with your data that you're using inside of your AI solutions, right? You need to then start putting some processes and controls around all that unstructured data. So very similar to this kind of medallion approach, you need to have a similar pattern, and we're applying that same pattern to the unstructured data, because you're not necessarily looking at the raw text files, right? You're actually, hitting an index of this thing that's been processed and all this other stuff, right? So there's some work that needs to be done there to make sure that, back to your point, it's good quality data. You get a good foundation of information that you feed in this machine, right? And it's only as good as the data you feed it.
And this process that you're talking about when it comes to creating this gold standard of data to then feed it into AI to give it the best outputs. In your experience, do you see organizations even having a process or workflow to create this gold data, or is it just data just sitting on top of data and it's just dusty, not doing anything with it?
Yeah, yeah, I would say they have processes on the numbers side again, because that's been around for a couple decades and things like that. And but on the tech side, no, it's all new, right? And to be fair, I mean, this stuff's only 2 years old, and we're learning so much just about different strategies and approaches and how to get the most out of it. So it's moving pretty fast. It's very capable, but it's kind of something that you really need to think through and have um, some processes and capabilities in there to do that. So I would say it doesn't exist because it's just so new. But let's not forget everything we learned, right? Let's learn from that and apply it to this new domain and start using that to power some of the insights.
Yeah. And with your consulting experience of over 2 decades and you're approaching a business organization to identify this use case, how do you determine if a use case is feasible, if there's enough impact, which is worth pursuing to create some good ROI and operational efficiency for a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the two dimensions, right? One, the value, one, the ease of implementation, right? And I think there's a number of things. Just talking about the business value. I mean, it should be something that people are asking for. That there's some genuine pull, versus you just pushing something. There needs to be some real interest or pain that you're solving, right? People just hate doing something, or there's really a need from your customers to providing some information you don't have. So I think those are, people can kind of think through what would be nice to have, right? And kind of just brainstorming and just putting that stuff down, right? And really thinking through it from a couple different lenses, around the kind of a customer experience and business value and all these other dimensions. And then on the implementation side, it's then thinking about, okay, what's to enable that? What are some of the technology sets to do, right? And I think some of the easiest things that would kind of move to the top of a list are things like there's a pattern called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Basically, it's you load these documents up, you ask a question, it searches the documents, finds the relevant information, and gives you an answer, right? So you're doing kind of chat GPT on your own data, right? It's doing a search. But that's a super easy thing to do and a great place to start. Texts are easy. Text analysis is kind of very easy with these large language models. And then there's other solutions that get more complicated. You may, be doing different actions. You might be, writing some code to hit a database and get an answer. There's a bunch of other things that you could be doing to kind of enhance that. So you just kind of evaluate that complexity, and you don't want to start with the hardest thing, right? You want to kind of get some momentum, quick hits, kind of get that going. So you would just then kind of assess that and try and put something in place there. Another key thing is, you want it to be in a safe place. You don't want to maybe have it as the most exposed kind of solution, or higher risk. You want to do something where there's plenty of humans around to validate it and assess it, versus having something just run in the background and just does a bunch of stuff, right? So you can get there, but you don't want to do that with your first one. So you want to be assessing that just from a quality, safety, security perspective, so that you're not putting yourself at risk as you're learning, to do these solutions and patterns. And then you'll learn a lot, and then you can take on those other challenges as you kind of go through it.
And just to kind of paint a vision for leaders that maybe have some kind of rag in place or already scanning these documents and there's some kind of retrieval tool, what would be like a phase two, a next level two when it comes to this rag tool? What are the capabilities that AI can do after we are scanning these documents and maybe the predictive or analytic side of things?
Sure. Well, I think that um, so with our approach, we like the concept of what we call a control tower, and there's kind of three pieces to it. Your data lake, that's the foundation. You got your AI engines, whether it's machine learning or generative AI, and then at the top you have your kind of action, kind of command center, where you're actually doing something with it, right? So I think once you get an initial kind of chat going on with RAG, that's great. You can access it, but the bigger value is going to be when you can embed that into a workflow or process, And these are things that don't need to be done real time. They can be done at night. They can be done at batch. You can run it 3 times, make sure the result's the same for each of the 3 times. And if it is, then use the result. There's a bunch of things you can do. And these things are getting cheaper and cheaper. So all the things that you would maybe have an intern do, right? This analysis, this detailed work that really nobody has time to do, you can kind of build these solutions to do them and make sure that they're doing meaningful, valuable work, right? So get some of these basic solutions in place and these components in place, and then start putting them in a basic process, right? And kind of having that process run, right? And then you're kind of reviewing the output with your kind of army of AI interns, right? And and you got to start small. Think about it. If you had 1,000 interns, you wouldn't know what to do. They'd be producing so much stuff. So you got to start small. Start with 2. Start with 3. And then start reviewing it, and then and enhance it from there. So I think that's the right way to think about it. And you want it to be. I heard a new term. It's called artificial capable intelligence. I was like, oh, that's interesting,
Yeah.
because it means that this new generative stuff is actually kind of you know capable and general purpose enough to get the stuff done. And I think the hit and the problem in the past is everything's been so narrow. It can only do this, and then you spend more time checking and updating and doing all that stuff. It's not even worth the time. Might as well just do it yourself, right? Well, now these systems are becoming more general and more capable that they can do 80-90% of it, and or maybe even 98% of it, right? And then you're just doing kind of the review, assessment, tweaking, and on top of that, right? So anyways, I think that kind of for leaders, once they get this kind of solution and I'll say stack or control tower in place, you need to start putting making this thing run by default, right? And having these processes use this stack to then have you start assessing and reviewing the results. And then you'll learn, hey, well, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do that? And you're like, yeah, sure can. Um, so that's the way I would approach it. But it's very important to get to action and
Yeah,
not
that
just assessing,
Yeah, like you said, those are the next phases built on top. And I think as a chief operating officer, if I've heard this, I think this is an amazing idea where I have an AI solution. We have back end reports running recommendations and actions of what you should do to the next day. Let's just say in the morning. So by the time you kind of hit your desk at 9 a.m., you have, your operations reports already kind of given to you versus, you know, 10 analysts trying to figure things out for you by the time it's noontime and there's a delay. So it seems like this could be very operational, efficient, having autonomous intelligence giving you insights and decisions based on data that you already have, and it's processing it in the best capabilities because of the processes that you have in place to filter out the gold standard of data that we should use to give these recommendations.
yeah, yeah. It can be running behind the scenes, background, asynchronous. Doesn't need to be this real time chat thing. It's actually, I think chat is hard, just for you guys putting things in because you don't know what the human's going to ask.
Yeah.
And a little secret: when we build the chat, we don't search on what the human asks behind in the chat. We manipulate what the human asks into something that's a better prompt and a better question, and then we give the answer to that, right? The thing is, humans are really unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to ask. Whereas you have processes in place, you have things in place, you have things to do. And if you think, here's the 10 things, right? If I ask these 10 questions, and I run that analysis once a week or once a month, whatever the thing is, I'm going to get some pretty good insights. And yeah, so that's kind of just the way to think about it. There's a reason we have processes, so kind of bake AI into those processes instead of just having a random chat or you having to do it all the time. Just kind of think through that, and you can get better results by doing that too. Um, so as you're building things out with that, right? So you can work for one company. They were actually an investment company, and they were just searching the data room and looking at a lot of the data so they could make better investment decisions. And the interns never really had time to do it, but they had 20 questions,
Wow.
and we spent a lot of time curating that, kind of putting some things around that, and got really good answers when you put some time into those 20 questions. And say there's only 20 questions, right? So just do some good work on defining what those 20 questions are, and it can hit all your data and assess it and give you answers. Then you can have some better results, right? So I think that's a good example of spend some time working the process, right? And then you get a really good result out of these 20 questions, and you can take that, and then you can run some other, put a summarization kind of notebook together on all those things as well. And then, so that's kind of, an example of the value of having those structured processes and having AI baked into that.
And we're always focused on ROI, return on investment. I think what you're describing is it's hard to kind of put this AI system in the box and say, okay, if you invest this much money, this is going to be the ROI. But I think as the technology is getting smarter and as you're increasing the capabilities of the AI control tower down the line, let's just say those 20 questions, it might have took you, weeks to figure out those 20 questions. Now with AI, it's a waiting 10 to 15 seconds to the question for the AI to give you the feedback, which then
Mm-hmm.
in return can save you 3 6 months of business decisions where the ROI is
Yeah.
ultimately kind of coming back, right?
Yeah, I heard another good story. I was explaining this to a colleague, and he was saying, "Yeah, when we were putting in databases and you know data lakes and things like this, and everybody's saying, well, what's the ROI on that?" And the one guy was like, "Well, it's going to be really hard for me to be able to tell you that right now as we're putting it in. But you're going to make a decision in a year based on all this information, all this data, and it's going to pay for everything." Right. So I think that, and I was like, yeah, of course, like information is power, right? And that's what we're doing here is we're getting your data. Not only that, then we're putting these analysts and these intelligence, running these assessments and analysis on this data so that you can make better decisions, right? And it's like, what's a good decision worth, right? Versus a bad decision. Back to
Yeah.
this investment thing, you make a really good decision. That's worth a lot of money, right? So but don't don't make this thing do the toughest analysis. Make this thing do the kind of lower level stuff so that you can do the higher end stuff and do some of that stuff, right? So have it as your aide, your intern, right? So that you can now be super powered to kind of pull all this stuff in and you know have additional muscle to you know produce better results.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it is as you're trying to buy more time and work smarter, more efficient, you can delegate everything to this AI and it's spitting out reports and then you're just in charge of leadership and strategy ultimately, right? And everything else can be delegated to help you with decision making. And I know that AI is transforming multiple industries. Have you noticed some high impactful use cases that stand out to you, top of mind right now?
Yeah, I think so. Back to what we talked a bit about earlier, there's this just converting text right into information, right? Is not wasn't there, right? So I think that there's just a ton of kind of value in that. Be able to scan through that, process through that in a meaningful way. Um, I mean, the use cases are kind of pretty broad, right? And I think, yeah. So we do a lot in manufacturing, and we do a lot in healthcare on the operations side, and there's just so many efficiencies in kind of looking at this. We're seeing initial easy use cases just looking at the text, pulling summarizations and all that stuff, and we use all this stuff internally too. We put a new 401k plan together, and we just ask the chatbot questions and getting all the kind of investments, assessments and all that stuff back for the team. And instead of having to read the 80 pages that they gave you, all that stuff, right? But we're seeing some real high value in the areas of not just the text, but also the numbers, and putting those two together. And what we've kind of, I think, a big thing that we're seeing, it's actually quite hard to do, is that a lot of people just want to ask questions to their data. And when I say data, typically numbers data, right? Their database. And they're like, oh, another report. I don't know what that report is. They get reportitis. They just drown in reports. What if you just chat your question and get your answer to the data? Well, that's a little different than these documents, right? In order to do that, you have to like type the question in English. Then needs to understand, okay, this is what you're asking. This is the structure of the data. This is what kind of the question you're asking, what it means. And now I need to go build a query that can go query the data, kind of bring the results back and do all that stuff. So we've seen some really good results in just exposing information and data to the leaders and the managers in the organization that maybe would forget where the reports are, or there's 200 reports and they just want to ask a question and they can just kind of get those answers really quick. We're finding back to, it's almost like you have your own personal data analyst, right? It's right there hitting your data, getting the information back, and you can drill in and ask these questions, right? In addition, we can be running analysis in the background, assessing what are the 20 things that you need to be looking out for, right? And just having these analyses kind of happening in the back, not just a report, but just assessing it and evaluating the performance. And is that something that then needs to be elevated and raised up so that you need to look at it, right? And that's what people are. They want something that can sense and assess and then kind of go after these areas of opportunity or weakness that really need to be addressed, right? So I would say that's the use case that's really popping out that our customers are very interested in, because there's so much you can do with it, and it's just everybody just wants access to that information. They want to ask their question without having to go off and develop this report and do this and wait 2 weeks and get it wrong and all that stuff, right? So we're seeing some real interest in that area.
Well, that's amazing. And honing in on healthcare for a bit. I know when anybody thinks of AI in healthcare, they think of AI reading CT scans and X-rays to reduce cancer rates, or they might be thinking about workflows and EHRs to reduce the time, or for doctors to, have summary text of more of like a clinician side of things. And you mentioned operations. How are you improving operational efficiency and operations in healthcare? And if it's not the clinical side, are these operational efficiencies still helping with patient outcomes and helping value-based care?
Yeah. I think with the move to value-based care, I mean, there's so many more things to track and manage. And if you do that, appropriately, right, you're going to take better care of the patients, and B, get some bonus payments for your organization as well, right? So I think, but there's just a lot of moving parts, and a lot of the EHRs don't necessarily have those things kind of baked in, and maybe some of the information is across multiple data sets to do that, right? So we've kind of, for some of our healthcare customers, put in this control tower, right? Again, that really kind of has all the information, does the analysis, provides them recommendations on kind of what needs to be done against kind of all of these targets, and that way it stops folks from being, under this, deluge of to-dos and all these things, and they get just drowned in the kind of action, but just really surfacing the most important things, right? And kind of using that as a priority for folks to really go after, right? And at many levels. It could be at the supervisor level, the manager level, the therapist or the clinician, right? What are the top three things that they need to be doing, right? And having that dynamically update as they're going through this, right? Also, it's assessing not just where they're at, but it's also kind of understanding where they've been, right? What's the trajectory on this metric, right? Is it going up? Is it go like, and these are things to, because is that target reasonable? If you have that target and at this trajectory, when are you going to get there, right? So I think all those are are very valuable components because you have to be able to helicopter up, assess the landscape, and say, hey, these are the kind of key areas to focus in on, given your objectives, right? And kind of having an aid because people just get lost in the weeds, right? So this kind of helps focus them, and of course provide better care to the patients.
I think one beautiful thing about your solution is it's not like a SaaS company where it's just one focal point solution that you're solving. And the beauty about a SaaS solution is we're able to target different job roles and actually help them and help improve their job efficiency with AI. So we're talking about leaders and running reports. Just thinking about the hospital setting, we have patients flowing in and out, and a solution like this can help with the scheduling, the forecasting, the amount of patients are coming in, how much staff do we need. A level up, let's just say you're a case manager and you have multiple cases that you need to see, or a social worker. This AI can tell, these are the top 5, 10 clients that you need to see before they get discharged. So just the capabilities are endless. Like you said, I think the first thing that any business leader, they have to look at their use cases, seeing what we're struggling with, what, if it's like a job role that's experiencing burnout or needing to increase productivity, and then kind of running back and forth with these processes to see how can AI improve this. And once you identify, going back to like the AI development process, so once you identify a use case, what are like the next steps? What does it look like working with you as a client to kind of moving from just a idea of use case to an actual proof of concept?
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, I think it's kind of working through it with the team to, brainstorm, plot these things up, understand, find that those target scenarios, and then, what you end up doing is you pick two or three that are, kind of makes sense, right? And then you would go into detail, right? Some more detail with those two or three, and then once you do that, you definitely want to select one as your initial proof of concept, and it shouldn't be too hard, and it should have some good benefit and be fairly visible and all that stuff. And then basically it's putting in real basic solution, probably even just a subset of the data set, just to show people it's a proof of concept, right? So given this subset of data, given it's just because people need to see the result, is very difficult to visualize some of the stuff until you actually see it. So I think that's, and basically it's a very quick kind of implementation of that, just kind of bare bones to kind of get people, a look see to understand kind of how the potential, right? Get some alignment, get some support on that. And then, you would kind of move it then into a pilot stage, once you kind of get through that and that helps you kind of assess some of the, more detailed requirements maybe you didn't think of when you were kind of coming up with it initially and things like that. So that's kind of the step you would do. And we typically build everything in the cloud. So it's super fast, kind of put that in place. It's secure, HIPAA compliant, a lot of other compliant credentials there. So anyway, you kind of do that, and then really, give some of the sponsors a chance to look at it and just think through, hey, yeah, there's some real potential here, and then you'll probably think of a bunch more things to do.
So it seems like it's a refinement process. There's just not like we just stop there every few weeks or however long the process takes. We continuously refine, meet, and kind of make this process workflow keep on improving until we're kind of satisfied with the results.
Yeah, so you build the proof of concept, you get the essence of everything in there, and you kind of get, once again, it's a concept, it's not a production thing. And then when you build your pilot, then you have to start thinking about, it's not just about building it, but it's about, um, once you build it, you then need to maintain it, and need to have testing around it, and need to have all these other kind of components from a safety and solution quality perspective, right? So that's why you really want to kind of make sure you have, the requirements fairly well understood, and then you're kind of building, I'll say, the operational capability in your pilot, right? And then how would you kind of build that? And then again, you're with an eye to how you're going to scale for other use cases, right? So the idea is for your pilot, you're kind of building that foundation so that you can then just start loading up all these other use cases on with this pattern that you have, right? And if you build the right pilot, right, you can do it in a way so that these other use cases are pretty easy to add on to that capability, right? If they're related,
Wow.
or sisters of that use case,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Last question to kind of summarize things for companies that are still hesitant about AI. What advice would you give them when it comes to the hesitation of integrating AI?
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of the new electricity. It's coming. It's not. No, there's no stopping it. The cat's out of the bag. So I think that the key is, how do you, it's just a tool, right? But then how do you kind of use this tool to really, you of course are mission focused, right? You have goals and objectives, right? And this is just another tool to kind of help you, get to that core mission and objective. And that's the goal, right? To drive a better product, a more productive product, so it's just another tool. Yes, it's very capable, and it's maybe a little. There's a lot to learn, but no, that's why we're here, right? So
Yeah.
to help
Yeah.
guide you through that. But it's just another tool to kind of drive the kind of forward progression of humanity to kind of start kind of moving up the a capability ladder and hitting the goals of our stated goals, and that's how to think through it.
Yeah. And looking at like the law of inertia, like there's just this boulder, this rock is moving and it's only going to get faster. And, as a business leader, when it comes to technology that's evolving, technology doesn't care. You either join it or you're going to get kind of like crushed in the way. So I think people need to get on the wave
Yeah.
before it kind of, takes off and they're going to lose their mark.
Yeah, you don't need to pick the hardest thing. Just get started, right? And it just, you'll learn so much just by getting started. Get started and just get into it, right? And just kind of learn, right? And you're not going to know what the kind of really really high value use cases are until you kind of get into it and you start to learn different things. You just got to, like I say, that first initial POC and pilot, that's there for you to kind of learn and assess. That's not going to, it probably isn't a home run, but you don't want it to be, because you want to kind of, you want to have it so that you can level up your capabilities, and that's the goal of it. Yes,
Yeah.
be profitable, right? It should have enough juice for that squeeze, right? But it's a journey. It's the first step. It's not the destination kind of thing,
Yes.
you know.
Powerful. And if a company wants to get started with Aidan and think about an AI solution, what's the first step they need to take?
Yeah, just head out to our website, aidenhealth.com, aiden.group for some of our manufacturing related use cases. Check us out there. I'm Quentin at aidenhealth.com, and we're on LinkedIn. Reach out to us there. We're happy to kind of engage you and just help you chat through things.
Awesome, Quinn. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care.